Today, we're diving into a really fascinating legal battle from the High Court of Kerala. It's a story that's being called the case of the capable wife, and it really gets to the heart of a tricky question. When does a woman's ability to work affect her right to spousal support? So get this. Two different courts looked at the exact same situation. A wife, Jeesha, who is a tailor. The family court looked at the facts and said, nope, she's a tailor, she can work, she gets zero maintenance. But then the high court takes a look and comes to a completely different conclusion. They say, yes, she's a tailor and she gets 8,000 rupees a month. A total 180. So what changed, right? How on earth did two courts look at the same set of facts and come up with such wildly different answers? Well, that's exactly what we're going to unpack here. To really get what's going on, we have to rewind a little bit. We need to go back to the original dispute between the wife, Jeesha, and her husband, Rajeevan, to see what that first court was thinking. Okay, so here's the basic setup, and none of this was ever really in question. Jeesha and Rajeevan are married, but they're separated. Interestingly, they're both professional tailors. They have 2 young kids, and the kids live with Jeesha. Now, the family court had already told Rajeevan he had to pay maintenance for the children, and he was doing that. No argument there. But when it came to Jeesha herself, the family court awarded a big, fat 0. Nothing. Their reasoning was pretty straightforward. Because she was a trained tailor, she was capable of earning, and that, in their view, meant she wasn't entitled to any financial support from her husband. And that single decision is what kicked off this whole appeal. So when Jeesha's case got to the high court, the judges basically zoomed in on 2 crucial legal questions that everything else hinged on. Here's the heart of the matter. First, just because a wife is capable of earning money, does that automatically, no questions asked, disqualify her from getting maintenance? And second, did Jeesha have a good, legally sound reason for living apart from her husband in the first place? The answers to these 2 questions would change everything. Now, to find those answers, the High Court didn't just look at the family's situation again. They went back to the bedrock, to the fundamental law that governs spousal maintenance in India. And the law we're talking about is Section 125 of the Criminal Procedure Code. Now, don't let the criminal part fool you. This isn't about punishing a crime. It's what's known as a social justice law. Its whole point is to act as a safety net, to protect wives, children, and parents from falling into severe financial trouble after a separation. It's literally there to prevent destitution. And this is where it gets really interesting. The court zeroed in on the phrase unable to maintain herself. Pulling from other major legal decisions, the High Court made it crystal clear. This phrase does not mean the wife has to be dirt poor or totally destitute. The bar for getting support isn't nearly that high. And building on that, citing the Supreme Court itself, the judges drove home a critical distinction. And this is the key right here. There is a huge difference between being capable of earning and having an actual earning. You see, just because you could make money, in theory, doesn't mean you are making enough to get by. So, with these powerful legal ideas as their guide, the High Court turned its attention back to the specific evidence in Jeesha and Rajeevan's case. Let's see how it played out. On that first big question about her income, the husband's entire argument was basically, hey, she's a member of the All Kerala Tailors Association. The court essentially said, so what? Being part of a club or an association doesn't prove you're actually making any money. They concluded there was zero proof of her actual earnings. The husband just couldn't show she was making enough to support herself. Then there was the second question. Why was she living separately? Jeesha had testified that she left because of cruelty from her husband. The High Court listened to her account and found it credible. They ruled that this was a sufficient cause, a totally valid reason for her to live apart, and that meant she hadn't given up her right to ask for maintenance. So what's the bottom line here financially? Well, the support for the kids stayed the same, 6,000 rupees for each, but for Jeesha, her award went from 0 to 8,000 rupees a month. That means the husband's total monthly payment jumped from 12,000 all the way up to 20,000 rupees, a pretty significant change. So you might be wondering, why does this one family's legal drama matter to the rest of us? Well, because the court used this specific case to send a much bigger message about a larger legal principle. You see, this verdict isn't just about a wife's right to receive support. The Supreme Court precedent the judges used also shines a light on the other side of the coin. The idea that an able-bodied person has a legal and a moral duty to work and provide for their family. It's a two-way street of responsibility. And that really leaves us with a huge question to think about.
This case perfectly illustrates this delicate balancing act. On one hand, the law is trying to make sure no one is left behind, left destitute. But on the other hand, it expects adults who can work to pull their weight. So the question is, how does our legal system find the right balance between someone's potential to earn and their actual responsibility to provide? It's a really complex issue, and it's right at the heart of family law today.